değerli misafirlerimiz, 6. oturumumuz Finansal Altyapı, Çevre ve Enerji ismini taşıyor. Oturumumuzu yönetmek üzere moderatörümüzü Sayın Hazine Müsteşar Yardımcımız Cavit Dağdaş'ı, TSKB Kıdemli Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Orhan Beşkök'ü, Lüksemburg'dan Avrupa Yatırım Bankası Head of Lending Operations'tan Bruno Deniz'i, Malezya'dan Kazana Nasyonel CFO'su Sayın Moit İzani Gani'yi, EBRD Türkiye Genel Bankacılık'tan Sayın Hüseyin Özhan'ı, İtalya'dan Unicredit Avusturya Orta ve Doğu Avrupa Yönetici Direktörü, Proje ve Mal Finansman Yöneticisi Sayın Paolo Bozzolo'yu, Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nden IFS Başkan Yardımcısı Dimitris Tsigratos'u sahneye davet ediyorum.
Saygıdeğer katılımcılar, değerli basın mensupları, kıymetli panelistler, İstanbul Finans Zirvesi'nde yer alan 6. oturumuna hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Oturuma başlamadan önce bu organizasyonu gerçekleştiren komiteye teşekkürlerimi sunuyorum. Bu zirve aynı zamanda bizim İstanbul'un uluslararası bir finans merkezi olma yolunda da önemli katkılar sağlayacağına inanıyorum. Bugünkü konumuz altyapı yatırımlarının finansmanı ve bunun alt başlığı olarak enerji ve çevre konusunu ele alacağız. Enerji ve çevre konusu sadece Türkiye'nin değil, dünyanın üzerinde çalıştığı önemli bir konu. Enerji biliyorsunuz regüle edilen bir sektör. Dolayısıyla tüm ülke politikaları enerji ve çevre uyumuna önem gösteren bir politika arayışı içinde. Şöyle bir baktığımız zaman dünyada artan nüfusa ve artan yaşam kalitesine paralel olarak enerji talebi hızla artıyor. Öte yandan bu enerjinin çevreye olan etkileri gün geçtikçe daha da önem kazanıyor. Ülkemiz açısından bakıldığında ise bizim son 10 yıllık dönemde enerji talebi yıllık ortalama %6.3 civarında büyüdü. Önümüzdeki dönemde de yıllık ortalama %7 büyümesi lazım, büyümesi öngörülüyor. Bu nedenle enerji yatırımları ve bu yatırımların finansmanı bizim için de önemli bir konu. İkinci önemli konu Türkiye açısından, Türkiye enerji ithal eden bir ülke. Türkiye'nin cari açığının hemen hemen hepsi enerji ithalatından oluşuyor. Dolayısıyla Türkiye'nin önünde yenilenebilir enerji, ülke kaynaklarının kullanılmasını öngören yatırımlar, artı enerji verimliliği bir özel önem taşıyor. Bugün bizim konumuz bu enerji yatırımlarının finansmanı. Bu finansmanı özel sektörün katılımıyla nasıl yaparız? Özel kesim ve kamunun ortak işbirliğinde risk paylaşımları nasıl olur? Bunları tartışacağız. Çok değerli 6 panelistimiz var. IFS'nin başkan yardımcısı Sayın Dimitris Tsigratos'u bizimle birlikte. Sayın Tsigratos'u Washington DC dışındaki Dünya Bankası'nın tek operasyon merkezi olan İstanbul'da ofiste yerleşik olarak kalmakta. Sayın Bruno Deniz Avrupa Yatırım Bankası'ndan, Avrupa Yatırım Bankası'yla yıllardır süren bir finansman ilişkimiz var. Avrupa Yatırım Bankası hem özel sektörü hem kamu sektörü projelerine finansman sağlayan bir kuruluşumuz. Unicredit yöneticisi özellikle Sayın Paolo Bozzolo'nun, Sayın Paolo Bozzolo Avusturya ile Orta ve Doğu Avrupa Bölgesi Proje ve Emtia Finansman Başkanı kendisi. Onun özellikle kamu özel sektör işbirliği konusundaki deneyimlerinden faydalanacağız. Avrupa İmar Bankası'ndan Sayın Hüseyin Özhan, Avrupa İmar Bankası'nın Türkiye'deki yatırımları finansmanı konusundaki katkılarından bahsedecek. Bir önemli konu ülke yatırım fonlarının enerji yatırımlarına ilgisi. Çok değerli bir panelistimiz var. Malezya Ülke Yatırım Fonu'nda Sayın Moht İzani Gani. O da ülke yatırım fonlarının altyapı yatırımlarına etkilerini bizle paylaşacak. Son olarak Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Sayın Orhan Beşgök bizimle Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası'nda enerji yatırımlarına yaptığı önemli finansman katkıları var. Onları değerlendireceğiz. Müsaadenizle önce ben Avrupa Yatırım Bankası'na dönmek istiyorum. Avrupa Yatırım Bankası'nın özel sektöre verdiği finansman desteği, özellikle enerji konusunda, bu finansman desteğinin özel sektörün enerji konusundaki yatırımlarının sürdürülebilirliği konusunda ve faaliyetleri konusunda bize bilgi vermesini rica ediyorum. Buyurun.
Thank you very much. Indeed, the European Investment Bank is in fact the bank of the European Union, so member states of the European Union are also the shareholders of the EIB, and EIB has in fact a very long-standing EIB has a very long-standing partnership with Turkey. EIB started in fact lending to Turkey back in the 60s. And the volume of our lending to Turkey has increased quite substantially. Over the time span of the beginning of 2006 to today, it amounts to about 14 billion euros. We can clearly see over time that the amount invested in Turkey has increased a lot, especially as from 2005 onwards, because at that stage, in fact, Turkey was given the status of a candidate country for the EU accession. I don't know whether there's a... thank you. Right. So, it's quite a lot of money if you come to think about it. 14 billion euros since 2006. How do we actually look at the priorities? I think that's very important. As was pointed out already, energy is very important. Also infrastructure, environmental projects, transport projects. These are really key areas for the EIB to invest in, but also SME financing. In fact, those priorities are the result of a continuing dialogue between the Undersecretariat of Treasury, line ministers, but also the banking sector. Here in Istanbul is a very significant partner for us, and of course also the delegation in Ankara. This slide gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the main areas of EIB support. We have the public sector support, corporate sector, and the cooperation with the banks. I'll give you in the following slide also a number of examples of flagship projects, so you get a feel for the type of investments. But so in terms of public sector support, we really look at a number of the national flagship projects, local infrastructure also at the local authority level, human capital. It has been also mentioned several times before in this summit. R&D is very important for Turkey, and we are in close cooperation with TÜBİTAK, with YÖK, to support their R&D investments in the country. Climate change, there of course we're getting very much in the topic here also of energy, of renewable energy. This is also a fairly recent sector for EIB, but one that is clearly very promising. Energy efficiency is very high on our agenda, and we are in discussions both with banks, to cover private sector initiatives, but also with the public sector in this domain. Corporate lending focuses on energy. I'll give you some examples afterwards. R&D also, and foreign direct investments. Now, I would like just to turn, in the context of the Istanbul Finance Summit, I would like to also turn a little bit to our cooperation with the banking sector. The EIB is in fact, we don't have the intention to build up a network here in Turkey to actually be able to reach out to small investments. We really rely on our excellent cooperation with the banking sector. And indeed, of course, most of them are here in Istanbul, but we also have a number of public banks who are not here yet. They will be here quite soon. But we actually are able, in partnership with those institutions, to reach out to SMEs, but also to renewable energy. We do a number of the larger scale renewable energy projects on a corporate basis, so that means in a bilateral relationship between EIB, very often other sources of funding of other IFIs, of course, commercial banks, and the promoter. However, to reach out to smaller investments, we do that in cooperation with the banking sector here locally. I think what is very important for, as a contribution of EIB and other IFIs is that in these sectors of energy, of environmental investment, transport also, is that we can actually provide the long tenors. The local market is developing, it's developing quite rapidly. However, the tenors are not in line with what is actually needed if you look at energy investment, transport, also, environmental investments. They simply take they need a long repayment period. And I think that is really where sources such as IFIs can actually really bring quite some substance in terms of their contribution to underpinning investments in Turkey. Just a pie chart to give you a bit of a sense for the split. Now, of course, it's always a bit difficult to do this. You can see that the SME lending share is very big, transport, energy also. But I would say the SME lending is probably a little bit exaggerated in the sense that there is an overlap. So a lot of the SME investments are also in the energy sector and in the environmental sector. But still, you can see the big chunks. It's really the transport, energy, SME lending, and environment. And we have, of course, also a number of, as I mentioned before, R&D, industrial investments. Let us just turn here for your information a bit to some of these flagship projects. You will certainly recognize most of these transactions. In terms of transport, we're looking at the Bosporus Tunnel, Marmaray. Istanbul Metro project, we are financing the expansion of a number of the metro lines here. The high-speed line Istanbul-Ankara, which of course then links up to Marmaray. So all that, the collarbone in fact of the transport between Ankara and Istanbul. This is an area where we are clearly trying to provide value with our funding. We also look at other railway investments, municipal investments, and also even Turkish Airlines has benefited from EIB loans. Energy, immediately you can see we look both at the public side, as was mentioned before in the introduction, we look at the public side, we look at the private side. So we have been financing TEDAŞ, electricity distribution, of course very important if we look to the further development of the energy sector. It's not only to generate the energy, but actually to transport it correctly through the whole network so that it reaches consumers. We have financed some of the flagship renewable energy projects, Enerjisa, Osmania wind farm. We are also looking at the more conventional energy generation, but efficient energy generations, like the combined cycle power plant, which clearly has a much higher efficiency than most of the conventional energy production plants. I mentioned before, cooperation with the banking sector is very important. I would also like to mention, I'm sure we have the opportunity later on to discuss that more in detail, but our investment in Crescent Clean Energy Fund The funds certainly have a role to play in strengthening the development of the renewable energy sector. And as you can see, for environment, we have very specific in Istanbul, we call it urban environment, and that is indeed what it is, the earthquake risk mitigation programs. We have our cooperation that we recently started with Ilbank, which we see as a very promising one, a very important one to reach out to local municipalities across the country. We have projects for afforestation and erosion control. That's also in terms of our climate change investments, and municipal water and wastewater projects. This gives you a bit of a feel for the different EIB financing instruments. And you can see on the left side, it's the split between the more standard operations, and then at the bottom, you see what we call structured finance facilities, meaning the more risky profiles, which are not typically the standard products that the EIB has been using in the past. What I try to point out to you in this slide is really that we seek to reach the market with many different instruments. So you can actually go all the way from direct loans to the public sector, to the corporate sector, to SPVs, the cooperation with the banks, so what we call the intermediate loans, where we are able to reach out to much smaller investments. We are now working also on the first PPP, the Eurasia tunnel operation, and we are looking at the health sector. We also have more structured operations, and I will come back to you a bit later on that. I think it's an interesting initiative to consider, which is the BAK initiative in Turkey. This is the combination of funding and a partial guarantee for intermediary institutions to lend to SMEs in regional development areas. Now you can say this is SME business, we're quite far away from energy, we're quite far away from environment, but it's actually the structure that is interesting, and you will see, I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the last point is the equity fund again, where we also either through EIB or our subsidiary EIF can take part in equity funding. Now, if I'm still allowed to speak for 2 or 3 minutes, I would just like to mention also very briefly the project bond initiative. I think it is a very interesting initiative to try to promote the take-up of infrastructure funding through capital markets. This is an initiative of the EIB and the European Commission to increase the availability of debt for infrastructure through gaining the attraction of, I would say, institutional investors in the capital markets. Now, why is this initiative being developed at this point in time? I think for that we have to take a step back for a moment and go back to the pre-crisis level, the pre-crisis situation, where in fact quite a lot of infrastructure was funded to the capital market. What was important at that stage is in fact that on the one hand you had the project promoters of infrastructure and you had the investors. Now project promoters, they came up with a risk profile of an investment that was maybe not investment grade. It was maybe BBB, BB+. And you had the investors who were very keen, due to their own constraints, to invest in AAA, so the highest possible rating of risk, or absence of risk, to put it that way. And what brought these two elements together, so the demand for the funding in the capital markets and the supply, that was in fact largely done through the monolines. Monolines were in fact instruments or institutions that were able to take the risk of a project and what they called in the market to wrap it and to improve it from, say, a single A or a BBB all the way up to a AAA. So that actually cements the market. You bring demand and supply together. Since the crisis, these structures have largely disappeared. This initiative, in fact, aims at tackling this problem in a slightly different way. So the bond initiative is not to wrap the whole of the issuance that goes to the capital market, but it actually tranches the issuance. So the bond initiative will plug in one tranche into the financing so that the super tranches are becoming better in terms of the credit profile. So you have a subordinated layer and then a senior layer. And that actually helps to get both the demand and the supply in the capital markets together. At least that's the idea. So I can show you a little bit how this looks like in terms of structure. You have on the one hand the project costs, and on the right hand then always the way it is funded. So we foresee two possible structures. On the left hand you have a funded structure. So actually the EIB through this project bond initiative will actually supplement up to 10, 15, maybe 20% of the funding. And then over and above that, you have the senior debt coming from the bond market. You could also have alternatives, which is the scheme on the right-hand side, where in fact the contribution of the EIB would not be funded, but it's more like a guarantee element. So if ever there's a problem with the project, that will kick in and money will be flowing from that EIB facility to support the project. So I think overall this is, of course, for the moment an initiative in the Union to support transport and energy projects for the trans-European networks, but it could be rolled out. I think it's an interesting concept to look at, and it could potentially kickstart more of the investments of infrastructure in the capital markets. Thank you.
Sayın Bruno Deniz'e, hakikaten Avrupa Yatırım Bankası ile uzun yıllardan beri ilişkimiz var. Avrupa Yatırım Bankası KOBİ'lere destek veriyor. Bizim garantimiz de. Hazine Müsteşarlığı KOBİ'lere özellikle enerji konusunda son 10 yılda yaklaşık 2,5 milyar dolar hazine garantili ve ikrazlı. Daha çok Avrupa Yatırım Bankası ve diğer uluslararası yatırım bankalarından sağladığı kredileri KOBİ'lere kullandırmıştır. Fon oluşturma önemli bir konu. Sayın Deniz'in de sonunda belirttiği gibi bu fonlara erişim önemli bir konu. Ben bu aşamada Sayın Paolo Bozzola'ya dönmek istiyorum. Bu özellikle kamu-özel işbirliği konusunda bu fonları, çünkü büyük altyapı yatırımları uzun vadeli kontratlara bağlı yapılar. Dolayısıyla uzun vadeli fonlara ulaşmak mümkün. Burada bir kısıt var mı yok mu? Kamu-özel işbirliğinin bir diğer konusu risk paylaşımı. Belki değinir. Bu risk paylaşımının kamu-özel arasında nasıl paylaşılacağı önemli bir konu. Ticari riskleri var, finansal riskleri var, idari riskleri var. Bu risklerin belirlenmesi ve bu risklerin paylaşımı önemli bir konu. Bu çerçevede Sayın Paolo Bozzola'ya mikrofonu vermek istiyorum. Yalnız 6 tane panelistimiz olduğu için müsaadenizle 10'ar dakikayı da kısıtlamak istiyorum. Çok teşekkür ederim anlayışınız.
Thank you very much. I will focus on, I will touch briefly on PPP, but I think as my colleague from EBRD will be discussing the actual PPP schemes in a very, let's say, legal way, which is a field I do not dare to explore as a lender. I will maybe focus, given that now we understand how we're organized, on what has happened to financing in the PPP sector as a result of the crisis, which is, of course, as a colleague from the IB mentioned, has changed the landscape, yeah? And I think we are all looking for, let's say, ways to finance projects in the immediate future. I think we all know that in the long term the landscape shall have changed, but we don't know how long the long term is, and we have some interesting projects to finance now. And the idea is, of course, not to miss out on opportunities and to maximize the amount of funds that are accessible to good projects. Yeah? So I will start by, I mean, this is all the PPP stuff, but I will start by looking at the impact of the financial crisis on the volumes of project financings and PPP financings, yeah, in Europe. And if you see, I mean, the year before the crisis, 2007, according to these statistics, we had 30 billion in initiatives being financed. And as the crisis set in 2008, and remember there was sort of a slight hope that things were getting better, and then they got much worse, you see that in 2009 there was a significant reduction of volumes to practically half of what was done in 2007. So I think the mark that the crisis has left on our sector is indelible, and it will take a long time to recover, let's say. I don't think that's a negative thing in itself. I think that's an adjustment. Maybe some of these projects have not been structured correctly. Maybe some banks had taken positions which ultimately were not resulting in value added to their shareholders. Maybe the granting authorities were not getting the best deal in the long run, even though I mean, in the short run, some people may argue the contrary. And as we see, after this adjustment, the trend has begun to improve, but we will take a while to get back to 2007 volumes. This is just a very sorry about the fact that it's very small. I mean, what has been happening since most of the PPP initiatives in the recent future have taken place in the transportation sector. A lot of them in France, which is a country that has successfully, let's say, reached a risk allocation which is acceptable to their granting authorities and also to the markets. And of course they have the advantage that they have a good rating, so they have, as opposed to other countries with a less, with not such a good rating, to have access to alternative sources of finance. Let's look at the pricing now. I mean, if you look at the pricing also, look at the spreads in 2007. Yeah, we were at the 100 basis point level. This is over Euribor. And now let's see, let's see where we are now. I mean, spreads, the cost of debt, which basically the spread is what you add on top of Euribor, then you may have some hedging cost. But basically, this is a very important component of total interest calculated on debt paid by projects. And we see that the cost of debt has significantly increased. Again, is that a bad thing? Maybe it's not a pleasant thing, but maybe it's a cure, because if banks were, I mean, of course, banks have had to work on their balance sheets and are working on their balance sheets to deleverage their balance sheets and render them safer, but at the same time, banks need to be remunerated for the risks that they take in order to be sustainable on a long-term basis and to protect their depositors. So I think pricing today reflects more what the risk-return equation is, and hopefully it will reduce as banks get, let's say, reorganized and restructured financially. And of course, people who lend money to banks, when banks have to go out and get money, they will be able to purchase this money at a lower price. But I do not think there will be. We have. So what's happened after all this? Banks funding. Banks have not as much liquidity access as before, because people are investing in banks less. On the one hand, banks are trying to increase their equity to total assets ratio, and this is resulting in constrained liquidity. as a result of this change in philosophy of banks, banks are more reticent to provide long-term funding for projects. Of course, for a PPP project, you know, financing of construction plus 20 years or even more is ideal, but many banks cannot do this anymore, do not want to do this anymore, or both. So we have less long-term financing coming from banks available. And of course, this is where our friends from the EIB and from the international financial institutions like the EBRD and the IFC can provide significant help. This, let's say, willingness to improve their balance sheets on the side of banks is being, let's say, also forced by additional regulation, because of course we have decided the banks have to get safer, and we have things like Basel III that are requiring banks to better manage their asset liability equation and to match their long-term assets with long-term deposits. And of course, this is something that is having an impact on banks' willingness to lend. Of course, banks are deleveraging. Yeah, you hear about, there's a very fashionable word, runoffs or portfolio runoffs. If you add the amount of project debt that banks want to sell, we come up to a pretty interesting number. It's 500, 600 billion euros of portfolio that the banks are trying to sell. And of course, that goes in the opposite direction of having to lend. But many banks have to sell part of the existing portfolio in order to be able to provide new project debt. And that is, of course, affecting the situation. So the consequences of this, as we said, banks' appetite for long-term financing is decreased. Banks are retiring from some of the markets because, of course, they cannot be everywhere. There are shorter-term financing schemes which are being implemented. And, of course, this has a consequence on the very large volume projects. For example, Turkey is a country that, because of its growth, requires very large volume projects to be implemented, and we have to find the right balance between how large can a project be, but how small must it be for it to get financing? Because if it's too large and it doesn't get financed, no one is winning. So we need to find the right size to optimize the amount of financing that comes in and to maximize the amount of projects that ultimately gets financed. Yeah? And it's better to finance 5 projects that cost 500 million euros each than 1 project that costs 2.5, because we'll probably not be able to finance the latter, but we would be able to finance the previous 5. In terms of what we can do in this whole, I'm running out of my minutes, but I'll be very quick. What can we do? I mean, there is the first solution to this challenge is that before we have thought about, I mean, the traditional way of financing was providing long-term financing like what is shown in this chart, 20 years or what have you. Now this has always been a term that has existed in the industry, basically a mini-perm. So basically, instead of providing 20-year finance or 22-year finance, you as a bank say to your borrower, I will provide, I will give you construction plus 3 years or construction plus 4 years. There will be some amortization during the initial years, but at some point there will be a final maturity date and you will be forced to refinance. That is quite a dramatic solution. Of course, a lot of people don't like it. Not only clients don't like it, but many credit people don't like it, because portfolio managers and banks say, well, what happens if I cannot find refinancing? I have a default on my books, and that impacts on my balance sheet. So people have come up with this, but that doesn't mean that this is not a solution for some projects. Maybe there are some projects where takeouts from the capital markets and from the pension funds are so obvious that this may be the solution. A more moderate, let's say friendly solution is what we call the soft mini-perm. What is a soft mini-perm? It's a mini-perm like the one we said before that goes up until 7 years, but instead of having a final maturity date at the end of 7 years, the loan does not mature, but after 7 years, it's not interesting at all for the project to keep the loan. In other words, there are no dividends anymore, the interest rates go up, but and there is a full there's an acceleration of the amortization from the normal amortization that you have on a loan, which maybe if the loan gets repaid in 20 years, you say, okay, we'll repay in 20 years, but with the excess cash flow from each year, I will accelerate the repayment of the loan, and we will go from 28 years to 22 years. And this is something, so an accelerated long-term loan, if you will. It's an accelerated long-term loan, a mini-perm. And this is a solution that is being implemented in a number of situations. Other solutions, I didn't know I was getting so bad with my eyes. Other solutions are, of course, the fact that we need to introduce other sources of financing, so not just banks. Yeah, we need to look at the multilaterals, at the EBRD, the IFC, the EIB. The schemes with the EIB have also already been discussed. There are the umbrella structures with the IFC and the EBRD, and then we can also talk about export credit agency financings. These are all pieces to the financing which we need to explore to make sure that we can have a fully funded project at the end of the day. This is just an example. For example, in Holland, and it may be that one day we apply it here, in Holland there's a project called the N33, it's a highway, and at financial close, yeah, there's a pension fund that will say how much of the debt it will take out after construction, subject to successful completion. So there's going to be a completion concept, which, completion under a construction contract, but there will be also a concept which is called financial completion. There may be some covenants that the completion has to satisfy for the pension fund to be happy, but if those conditions are met, the pension fund is obliged to take off the bank debt. And of course, this is going to make banks more interested in providing financing here, because those that can no longer lend long-term are going to say, well, I know I'll be take out after construction, I'll lend into this project. So this is a solution. Then the EIB solutions we were discussed much better than what I would be able to, so I'll just jump over this one, but the Project Bonds Initiative is quite an interesting initiative for project financing. And as I said, besides the EIB, we have what we call the EBRD or IFC umbrella structures, where I think there are two advantages there. Because of the way the umbrella structure works, the political risk associated to the project is mitigated, and this motivates more banks than otherwise to lend into these transactions on the one hand. On the other hand, these multilaterals are able to offer somewhat better terms. For example, it may be that the portion which they lend directly may be a longer term, I don't know, maybe they decide to lend 15 years when the commercial banks can lend 12 years, optimizing the financial structure. Another element which is coming back, which was traditionally a very interesting way of, this traditional way of financing things long term, you had the export credit agency. So you looked at the equipment, I don't know, you had Ansaldo turbines or Siemens turbines or Alstom turbines, so you'd get Sace or Hermes or Coface involved. And this was people were sort of forgetting about the ECAs as the world was accelerating and finance was going very well. 2005, 2006, we saw less ECA financings. Now, ECA financings are an integral part of very large volume financings. And I think for many of the projects in Turkey, we will have to look at situations where we have EBRD or IFC, maybe EIB as well, and ECA financings. But we must not forget ECA financings. So, recommendations and takeaways just to finish. There is no, in today's world and given what's happening and what's happened, there is no, let's say, magic solution. We just need to work on various sides. And the solution has to be a boring solution, but a good one. In other words, let's work on the strength of the concession agreement. Let's work on reducing the project size. Let's work on making the working on alternative sources of financing, allowing for capital market takeouts, pension fund takeouts, or involvement. But in the meantime, until these things materialize, and because project bonds, for example, is something that we talk about, but we need to really see some project bonds happening, especially in markets with credit ratings under A-. We need to find solutions which are putting together many of these elements in order to make these projects happen. Thanks very much.
Ben çok teşekkür ederim bu güzel sunum için. Hakikaten finansal kısıtlar oldukça ağırlaşmaya başladı. Sizin de belirttiğiniz gibi burada artık ülke egzim banklarının rolü giderek artmaya başladı. Uluslararası yatırım kuruluşlarının rolleri artmaya başladı. Klasik bankacılık şeyinde. Vadeler kısaldı ve bizim de yani bu tip altyapı yatırımları da uzun vadeli yatırımlar, uzun vadeli kontratlar. Bu ciddi bir finansal kısıt. Şimdi aynı çerçevede hemen devam edelim EBRD ile. Sayın Hüseyin Özhan Bey. Sayın Hüseyin Özhan Bey.
Teşekkürler Müsteşar Yardımcım, sağ olun. Müsaadenizle İngilizce devam edeceğim. Prezentasyonu İngilizce hazırladık. Thank you very much. That was quite nice to hear from both EIB and UniCredit, especially in terms of alternative financing structures in this new era with reduced liquidity. I definitely agree with smaller sizes, with more banks involved, especially multilaterals like us, IFC and EIB, on top of that ECA structures, and alternative structures as bonds would be really important over the course of next 5 to 10 years. Now, what I will do is I will try to give a more generic prescription instead of providing numbers, instead of providing graphs and so on and so forth. I would like to go into more basic elements of PPP structures and how they should be structured so that it could be financed in especially countries like ours in Turkey. But prior to that, I would like to take 2 minutes to explain what EBRD does and how long it has been since we are in Turkey. Unlike the EIB or the IFC, we are pretty new in Turkey. We have established our regional office in Turkey in 2009, and 2010 was basically the first full operational year. And in just over 3.5 years, we have provided financing in an amount totaling approximately 2 billion euros. Just this year, 2012 estimate, we will be providing financing exceeding 1 billion euros in 26 different projects. If you look at the distribution of these projects, the biggest portion is the FI, because we work closely with Turkish banks for SME lending, for renewable energy lending. Secondly, there's the energy infrastructure, which is roughly a little more than 1/3 of our portfolio in Turkey, and the third one is infrastructure, and then infrastructure meaning transport infrastructure mainly, and municipal environment infrastructure, and then we have what we call the industry, commerce, and agribusiness as the fourth pillar in Turkey, with roughly 200 million euros. Now, from now on, over the course of next years, as EBRD, we're planning on having annual business volumes in the vicinity of 1 billion euros, and roughly 1/4 of that will go to infrastructure projects. Public-private partnerships. PPPs are long-term contracts with the private sector, of course, to provide services to, for, or on behalf of the government. I think the key issue here is that PPP is a method of procurement, basically, and a complex structure requiring an efficient sharing risk between the private sector and the public sector. So it has to be balanced in such a way that both private sector, as well as the banks, as well as the public sector, will benefit from it. So we'll have a mutually beneficial scheme in place. Of course, not all PPPs are successful. As IFIs, we may not enter into some of the PPP structures. So that's why we're trying to find find the optimal solutions so that all these larger projects get financed. The first important question in terms of important elements, key elements for PPP structures, is the choice of the project. It has to be identified by the granting authorities that if the project we have at hand is the right one. Developmental impact is very important there. Economic reasons is very important. It has to have a positive economic IRR, as well as it has to be politically acceptable. Environment and development balance is really important there as well. It has to be environmentally friendly and with minimum impact to environment and social issues as well. And finally, it has to achieve the government's objectives for development. Similarly, what do the concession granting authorities wish to achieve? Here, setting up a PPP structure, it has to be minimum cost to government, of course, with maximum use, as I said, low environmental impact for road projects, for example, traffic diversion. It has to be a motor for development. It has to have private sector efficiencies, and again for road projects, free-flowing traffic for the projects. So, alternatively, in order to create a structure, a scheme that could be financed using the classical approach, is to perhaps create a framework, a policy framework for the PPPs. And this could be done by establishing a PPP unit at the central government level, which will be basically the umbrella on top, and then so that they can maintain know-how for each PPP projects. They can introduce standardization. They can have clarity in the market. Also, since they have the know-how, they can speed up the repeat transactions, and also maintain the consistent government position. So, having at the central government level an umbrella organization would also, in our opinion, speed up and in creation of successful PPP structures. Procurement and tender process. Since we don't have much time, I'm not going to too much go into this. But in order to set up procurement procedures and tender processes which is transparent and clear for everyone with proper pre-qualification criteria are crucial. And not only setting up a central unit, but also having a one single PPP law that encompasses basically the entire structure would also increase the effectiveness of PPPs, in our opinion. And we have the 10 core principles for having the PPP laws, which that they have to be based on a clear policy. So to increase the private sector participation, they have to create a sound legislative foundation for concession, provide clarity of rules, provide a stable, predictable concession legal framework, so that it has to ensure that that legal framework will not be changed retroactively. The PPP law should promote fairness, transparency, and accessibility to concession rules and procedures, as I said. And this law should be consistent with the country's legal system, but at the same time should embrace the important issues such as international arbitration, for example. It should allow for state undertakings and guarantees at the times because of the long tenor, long term, and less liquidity times. State should interfere with guarantees, and also finally it should accommodate security interests. So talking about security, if you look at a PPP structure financed by the banks, usually 20%. Nowadays it's actually more 30, maybe more, but at least 70 to 80% are financed by the banks. So if things go wrong, the banks need to be able to fix it before the concession is at risk. So proper PPP structures should have step-in rights and termination clauses. Also, unilateral change or termination to be balanced by economic compensation in case that if the termination happens for whatever reason, that assumption would provide additional support for the project to go ahead. And these all could be achieved via direct agreements. And finally, I will touch upon the dispute resolution requirement for international arbitration by persons familiar with the structures of the PPP as grantees, granting authorities, or this PPP unit that we're talking about is likely to be special as it will be an SPV company set up under the domestic law. So dispute resolution is also crucial for international financing. Thank you very much.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Hakikaten önemli bir konuya değindiniz. Bu risk paylaşımı önemli bir şey çünkü bir kamu hizmetinin kesilmesi söz konusu değil. Yani bir hastane yapıyorsunuz. Hastanenin işte anlaşma bozuldu, hastane duracak veya yol yapıyorsunuz, anlaşma bozuldu, yol duracak diye bir şey söz konusu değil. Yani bu riskler, ticari riskler, finansal riskler ve idari risklerin nasıl paylaşılacağı hakikaten geniş bir çerçeve içinde ele alınıp tartışılmalı diye biz de düşünüyoruz. Yine bu çerçevede kamu fonlarından bir görüş alalım. Malezya Kamu Fonu'ndan Sayın İzanegani aramızda. Kamu fonlarının, ulusal fonların bu yatırımlarda nasıl bir rolü olabilir?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Very good afternoon to all participants, and thank you to the organizing committee for inviting me here to come to this beautiful city of Istanbul. It's always nice to come here. And now I'd like to bring you to Malaysia, since I'm talking something related to infrastructure financing, what we do and how we do in Malaysia. Some background on my company, Khazanah Nasional Berhad, is an investment arm of the government of Malaysia. Well, it manages about 40 billion US dollars of assets. We invest in sectors strategic to the country. Also, we invest in geography strategic to the country. In terms of sectors, infrastructure is one of the major sectors that we do. We invest in highways construction. We invest in utility. We invest in power. We invest in renewable energy. And of late, we also invest in leisure and tourism business as well. So we also have involvement in financial institutions as well. Also, I can mention here that the company also big in healthcare sector. In fact, we invested in a company in Turkey called Acıbadem, which has, we have worked very well with the party here. As you may have heard, post-acquisition, we listed our healthcare entities, combined assets or hospitals in Turkey, in Malaysia, in Singapore, Parkway Hospital, Apollo Hospital in India, and we listed into under one company called IHH. It became the second largest healthcare provider in the world after a company in US. And then in terms of geography, we invest in geographies like Singapore, Indonesia, China, India, as far as Middle East here, as I said, in Turkey as well. Coming back to investment in infrastructure, I think we have had good experience in terms of financing our infrastructure. One good thing that we had in Malaysia is that the capital markets in Malaysia is very deep. Financing of any projects can easily be done through capital markets. I think savings rate in Malaysia is very high. Therefore, a lot of investors coming from pension funds, insurance companies, financial institutions can easily come to the market. And in Malaysia as well, we are very deep in sukuk or Islamic bond market. In fact, we are one of the leaders in the market in terms of Sukuk or Islamic bond market. In fact, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey, Ali Babacan, came to KL to talk about the capital markets in KL, and also the plan to develop finance market in Turkey as well. So the recent one, as early as beginning of the year, we had a financing for highway project, refinancing actually, of up to $10 billion, largest ever in the world for that kind of size. In fact, all this while, Khazanah has been tapping capital markets in Malaysia, and it has been quite easy for us, as I said, because the liquidity is there. For example, just now when I mentioned the highway construction, we finance up to 27 years, which is not seen in other part of the world. The kind of length of the Sukuk. But we managed to do because some investors, like insurance companies and pension funds, they like that sort of tenure to match the assets. One example that I can mention here is that government of Malaysia has also embarked on a project called MRT. I think there was one person from Hong Kong also as well talk about MRT project. So we have embarked on a project recently. As early as this year, we have raised financing for this project. It will go on for the next 2 or 3 years, to cater for this construction. So I can share here our experience in terms of tapping capital market has been good because of the depth of the capital market in Malaysia. And I think for us, we'll continue doing so. With that, I pass the floor to the moderator again. Thank you.
Ben çok teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi hemen IFC'ye geçelim. KOBİ'lerin finansmanı, özel kesimin finansmanı. Sayın Dimitris Striagos bize IFC'nin operasyonları ile ilgili bilgi verecek. Buyurun.
Good afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with a number of our clients and also a number of our partners. I would like to focus a little bit on our strategy and also our achievements in a topic which is a great significance, I think, for this region that we cover out of Istanbul here as IFC, Europe, Middle East and North Africa, also for Turkey, but it's important for the future in our world. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the links between energy, infrastructure, and also the environment. And before I would start, I would go into that one. I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of IFC's sustainability framework, which is relevant for infrastructure and energy investments, but also it's not limited to those sectors. And we at IFC, we apply it to each and every decision that we make. The sustainability framework articulates IFC's commitment, strategic commitment to a sustainable development, and is an integral part of our approach to risk management. It includes the performance standards on environmental and social sustainability, which help our clients to do business in a sustainable way. It also promotes sound environmental and social practices, encourages transparency and accountability, and contributes to positive development impacts. As some of you might know, or some of our partners who have adopted them know, these standards have become globally recognized as a benchmark for environmental and social risk management in the private sector. Now, when I turn around to infrastructure and energy sectors, I mean, these are the two sectors that have a significant role to play in supporting sustainable economic development. And let's look about access to energy. Access to energy is a fundamental building block of economic development. But if you look at it, many developing and developed countries, I mean, they face many acute challenges in this area. Many are dealing with insufficient and expensive generation, compounded by limited and aging distribution infrastructure. As a result, according to World Bank data, there are about 1.6 billion people in the world today that live without access to electricity. Many have to make do with expensive and unreliable service. And concerns about global climate change and energy security have also increased the demand for renewable energy. And renewable energy technologies are, in our view and the view of many others, probably one of the most sustainable ways to meet the ever-growing energy demand going forward. They offer cheap, reliable, and safe energy generation. Significant investment in renewable energy is needed in the coming decades to meet the needs of the emerging economies. And with many governments facing fiscal constraints, public funding alone will not be enough. So the private sector, which is our key client as IFC, I mean, in addition to the countries that we represent and the private sector operates in, we feel has a major role to play in this area and will be the source of much of the necessary investment. And the area of renewable energy, we think, creates tremendous opportunities for the private sector. And investor interest in this sector is also growing. Sustainable companies with scalable models are attractive financing, even in some of today's difficult market conditions. I mean, we've done a number of transactions in this area with some of the people who are on this panel, are represented on this panel today. We, as IFC, on our own account, we've also played a significant role in mobilizing funds from such investors. And since 2008, when we say that the crisis began, we have been able to mobilize about $1 billion of investment, to support renewable energy projects in the region that we cover, in Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. Governments, they also play an important role in creating the right regulatory environment to encourage private sector involvement and investment in the sector. And we work with many governments around the world, including the Turkish government, to support these efforts. We have a strong track record, as I have seen, developing innovative solutions to promote and support renewable energies projects involving the private sector. And since 2008, for our own account, we have invested over $2.4 billion in more than 80 projects spanning 30 countries. We rank as the leading investor in financing new generating capacity of solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and hydropower. Renewable energy is also a key part of our regional infrastructure business, including here in Turkey. So we have built a portfolio of 1 billion, for our own account, of 23 investments in 14 countries. Our focus is on doing first-of-a-kind projects in new markets. And about 40% of our infrastructure business in this region is dedicated to renewable energy. And I think our colleagues from EIB and they also talk about energy efficiency, which is an area that, and climate change related projects, which is an area that I leave outside this discussion. And we know that renewable energy is a priority area for Turkey, given the large energy needs and also the fact that a lot of the energy is imported. And we have been strongly supporting Turkish companies in their efforts to invest in renewable energy. And Turkey is the second largest recipient of IFC's funds for wind projects. We also work with the government on the Clean Technology Fund that was developed by the government of Turkey, the World Bank, and IFC and EBRD. And the Clean Technology Fund has invested alongside us in many of these important renewable energy projects. I mean, IFC's focus is on supporting local industrial companies as they take their steps into renewable energy. And our initiatives, we hope, help incubate new commercial products and accelerate their use. A good example is our IFC World Bank Lighting Africa program, which helps manufacturers develop clean, inexpensive lighting products to replace kerosene lamps and candles in Africa. And the idea is that if this project, ramps up and is successful in Africa, we want to replicate it in other parts of the world. Within the renewable energy space, we'll continue to focus on projects and sectors with good commercial potential and sponsors where our presence can make a difference. We think that investments in renewable energy is the right response to many challenges. It helps meet supply imbalances and addresses the problem of global change. It brings benefits not only for individual consumers, but also for the businesses that need reliable, affordable energy to grow. Simply put, it helps the private sector succeed and it helps the countries grow. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Hakikaten enerji verimliliği konusunda ve enerji yatırımları konusundaki katkılarınız son derece önemli. Şimdi bize Türkiye tarafından dinleyelim. Biz Türkiye'de bu fonları nasıl kullanıyoruz enerji yatırımıyla ilgili? Sayın Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Sayın Orhan Beşgök. Buyurun.
Teşekkür ederim Sayın Dağdaş. 10 dakikalık zaman limitine sadık kalarak prezentasyonumu tamamlamayı umuyorum. Sunumuma başlarken bu zirvenin gerçekleşmesine katkısı olan tüm kurum ve kuruluşlara teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Sunumumda ilk önce Türkiye'deki elektrik enerjisi üretim ve tüketimiyle ilgili bir takım saptamalar yapıp çok kısa mensubu olduğum bankayı tanıttıktan sonra yenilenebilir enerji ve enerji verimliliği yatırımlarına olan yaklaşımımızı özetlemek istiyorum. Dikkatinizi çekmek istediğim ilk husus Türkiye'de milli gelir ve elektrik tüketimi arasındaki yakın ilişki. Grafikten de görüldüğü gibi 1980-2011 yılları arasında genelde milli gelirin artış gösterdiği yıllarda elektrik tüketimi de artış göstermiş. Biz bu ilişkinin yakın gelecekte de devam edeceğine inanıyoruz. Türkiye büyüdükçe elektrik enerjisi ihtiyacı da artacaktır görüşündeyiz. Dikkatinizi çekmek istediğim ikinci husus elektrik üretiminde özel sektörün payındaki artış. Bunda hükümetimizin enerji sektörünün liberalleşmesi konusunda gerçekleştirdiği reformların da büyük katkısı var. 90'lı yılların başında özel sektörün elektrik üretimindeki payı %8'lerdeyken bugünlerde bu pay %50'yi geçmiş durumda. Önümüzdeki yıllarda bu payın daha da artacağına inanıyoruz. Elektrik üretiminin girdilerine baktığımızda son yıllarda doğalgazın payının artış gösterdiğini görüyoruz. 1995'lerde %20 iken bu pay bugünlerde %45'lere ulaşmış durumda. Buna karşın ağırlıklı hidroelektrik olan yenilenebilir enerjinin payı 2011 yılında %25 olarak gerçekleşmiş. Elektrik enerjisi üretiminde kullandırdığımız girdilerin %60'a yakınını ithal ediyoruz. Bu perspektiften baktığımızda yenilenebilir enerjiye dayalı üretimin gerek ithal girdilere olan bağımlılığı azaltma, gerekse ödemeler dengesine olan olumlu etkisi açısından önem arz ettiğini düşünüyoruz. Türkiye'nin sera gazı emisyonlarına baktığımızda 1990-2010 yılları arasında sera gazı emisyonlarımızın %115 gibi yüksek bir oranda artış gösterdiğini görüyoruz. Bunda en büyük etken de enerji üretim ve tüketimi. Enerji üretim ve tüketimi Türkiye'deki sera gazı emisyonlarının %71'ine neden oluyor. Bu saptamaya yenilenebilir enerji açısından baktığımızda yenilenebilir enerjinin sera gazı emisyonlarını azaltıcı ve iklim değişikliğine olan olumlu etkileri nedeniyle önem arz ettiğini söylemek tekrardan mümkün. Pardon. Artan enerji ihtiyacımızı karşılamak için yeni kapasite yaratmak yanında tüketilen enerjinin daha verimli bir şekilde kullanılmasında büyük önem arz ettiğine inanıyoruz. Bu grafikte Türkiye'nin enerji yoğunluğunu görüyoruz. Dünya ortalamasının bir miktar altında ama OECD ortalamasının yaklaşık %50 üzerinde Türkiye'nin enerji yoğunluğu. Japonya'nın ise 3 misli. Bu da aynı değerde milli gelir üretmek için Japonya'nın 3 misli enerji tükettiğimizi, OECD ortalamasından da %50 fazla enerji tükettiğimizi gösteriyor. Biz enerji verimliliği konusunda Türkiye'de önemli bir potansiyel olduğunu ve başta demir çelik, çimento, seramik, kağıt gibi enerji yoğun sektörlerde önemli bir enerji verimliliği potansiyeli olduğuna inanıyoruz. Bu inancımız yakın geçmişte Dünya Bankası'nın yapmış olduğu bir araştırmada da doğrulanmış oluyor. 2010 yılında yapıldı bu araştırma. Tabloda Türkiye'deki belirli sektörlerdeki enerji verimli potansiyelini görmek mümkün. Gerek elektrik, gerekse yakıtta, demir, çelik, çimento, tekstil, kağıt gibi sektörler ve toplam sanayide önemli bir potansiyel mevcut. Bunun dışında konut sektörü de enerjinin verimli bir kullanıcısı değil. Orada da önemli ölçüde, bilhassa yakıtta önemli bir tasarruf potansiyeli gözüküyor. Toplamda sanayi artı inşaat sektörlerinde %27 oranında bir potansiyel gözüküyor. Toplam potansiyelde 15 milyon petrol eşdeğeri ton yılda. Bu da Türkiye açısından önemli bir tutar. Çok kısa olarak mensup olduğum bankayı tanıttıktan sonra enerji verimli ve yenilenebilir enerji projelerine olan yaklaşımımızı özetleyeceğim. Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası 1950 yılında Dünya Bankası ve Merkez Bankası'nın desteğiyle kurulmuş özel sermayeli bir banka. Dünyada kalkınma finansmanını yapan kuruluşlar genelde kamu mülkiyeti altında ama Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası bunun istisnalarından biri. Halen en büyük pay sahibimiz İş Bankası grubu, %50 civarında payları var. Vakıflar Bankası'nın %8.4, geri kalanı da borsada kote. İstanbul Menkul Kıymetler Borsası'nda kote bir bankayız. 9.8 milyar Türk lirası aktif büyüklüğümüz var. Şu anda Türkiye'nin 16. büyük bankasıyız. 344 çalışanımız var. Mevduat toplayan bir banka olmadığımız için şubeleşme gereksinimimiz yok. Onun için sadece 3 tane şubemiz var İstanbul dışında. Verdiğimiz kredilerin sektörel dağılımına baktığımızda kredi stokunda en büyük payın elektrik üretimine ait olduğunu görüyoruz. Bunun da tamamına yakını yenilenebilir enerjiden oluşuyor. %35'lik bir paya sahip. Elektrik üretimine kredi verdiğimiz gibi enerji dağıtımına da kredi vermiş bulunuyoruz. Kredi portföyümüzün yaklaşık %6'sı elektrik ve doğal gaz şebekelerinin finansmanına dedike edilmiş durumda. Aktiflerimizin %67'si kredilerden oluşuyor. Kredi vermek bankamızın daima en önemli işlevi olmuştur. Böyle de olmaya da devam edecektir. Tablonun sağ tarafında çalışmakta olduğumuz uluslararası kuruluşların listesini görüyorsunuz. Dünya Bankası, Avrupa Yatırım Bankası, Avrupa Konseyi Kalkınma Bankası, Alman KfW, Fransız Kalkınma Ajansı, IFS', EBRD ve İslam Kalkınma Bankası gibi uluslar ve uluslararası finansal kuruluşlarla çalışıyoruz. Borçlanmamızın büyük bir bölümü de Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Hazinesi tarafından garanti edilmiş durumda. Hazinemize de bize olan daimi desteklerinden dolayı teşekkür etmek isterim. Şu ana kadar 95 adet yenilenebilir enerji projesini finanse ettik son 8 yıl içinde. Bunların 80'i hidroelektrik, 8'i rüzgar, 2'si jeotermal, 5'te biyomas ve diğerleri. Finanse ettiğimiz yenilenebilir enerji kredileri Türkiye'nin bu alandaki kapasitesinin yaklaşık %17'sini oluşturuyor. Şu ana kadar 200 adet yenilenebilir enerji projesini değerlendirdik. Finanse ettiğimiz 95 projenin 60 adedini diğer bankalarla beraber finanse ettik. Bu finanse ettiğimiz projelerin toplam maliyeti 6 milyar Amerikan doları seviyesinde. Bankamızın bu projelere taahhüt ettiği tutar ise 1.8 milyar Amerikan doları seviyesinde. Şu ana kadar kullandırdığımız kredi ise 1.4 milyar dolar. Bütün bu projeler devreye alındığında Türkiye'nin sera gazı salınımlarında 6 milyon karbondioksit eşdeğeri ton azalım olacağını hesaplıyoruz. Finanse ettiğimiz 95 projenin 65'i de fiilen üretimde şu an. Burada finanse ettiğimiz yenilenebilir enerji projelerinin önemlilerinin lokasyonlarını görürüz Türkiye içinde. Hemen hemen her bölgede finanse ettiğimiz proje bulunuyor. Yenilenebilir enerji yanında enerji verimliliğini de önemli bir sektör olarak saptadık ve yaklaşık 2 yıldır enerji verimli projelerini kredilendiriyoruz. Şu ana kadar yaklaşık 26 projeyi finanse ettik. Bunların sektörel dağılımına baktığımızda demir, çelik, otomotiv, plastik, çimento ve diğer sektörleri görüyoruz. Bu projelerin de devreye girmesiyle yaklaşık 1 milyon ton sera gazı salımında azalma bekliyoruz. Ve projelerin 180 bin konutun eşdeğeri bir enerji tasarrufu sağlayacağını hesapladık. Enerjide yeterli derecede yatırım var mı? Cevabı çok basit, var. En son veri 2012 başı itibariyle halen devam eden yatırımların tutarı 40 bin megawatt seviyesinde. Bunun hemen hemen yarısı yenilenebilir enerjide. Son yıllarda özellikle rüzgara dayalı enerji santralleri talebinde önemli bir artış gözlemlemekteyiz. Bu tür projeleri hangi kaynaklarla destekliyoruz sorusunun cevabını burada buluyorsunuz. Serbest kaynaklar yanında sadece yenilenebilir enerji ve enerji verimliliği projelerini finanse etmek için aldığımız krediler de mevcut. Örneğin Avrupa Yatırım Bankası enerji kredisi sadece yenilenebilir enerji ve enerji verimli yatırımlarının finansmanında kullanılıyor. Keza Dünya Bankası yenilenebilir enerji kredisi, KfW iklim koruma programı ve IFS'ten bu sene içinde aldığımız yenilenebilir enerji ve enerji verimliliği kaynaklarıyla sadece bu konulardaki projeleri desteklemekteyiz. Son olarak finanse edip devreye girmiş projelerden birkaç örnek göstermek istedim sizlere. Bares Bandırma'da Türkiye'nin ilk özel sektör rüzgar santrallerinden kurulu gücü 30 megawatt. Bu enteresan bir proje. Ankara'nın çöpünden şu anda elektrik üretiyor. Mamak çöplüğünde kurulu. Konusunun ilk örneği Türkiye'de yaklaşık 25 megawatt gücünde bir tesis. Şu anda bunun benzerleri Türkiye'nin çeşitli büyük şehirlerinde benzer yatırımlar gerçekleştirme. Ama bu yatırım türünün ilk örneği. Küçük çaplı bir hidroelektrik santrali Kayan Alfa 11 megawatt kurulu güce sahip yaklaşık. Son olarak da jeotermal, Gürmat jeotermal 47 megawatt kurulu güce sahip. Beni dinlediğiniz için teşekkür ederim.
Biz teşekkür ediyoruz. Değerli katılımcılar, panel oldukça faydalı geçti. Özellikle ticari bankaların kamu özel işbirliği konusundaki finansal kısıtları oldukça gündemde. Oradan bir öneri geldi. Büyük proje değil, daha küçük projelere ticari kredilerle yapılabilir dedi. EBRD'den katılan arkadaşımız, panelistimiz bir kamu özel işbirliği genel çerçevesinin ve bu genel çerçeve içinde risk paylaşımının açık olmasını önerdi. Ulusal fonların ciddi katkısı olabileceği, bu konuda deneyimleri olduğunu öğrendik. Dünya Bankası özellikle KOBİ'lere finansmanda çok etkin bir rol oynuyor. Bu rolü artırıcı yönde inisiyatif alacağını duyduk. Bu fonların kullanımında Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankamızın etkin kullanım görsel olarak da izledik. Soru almak isterim ama vaktimizin bittiğini söylüyorlar. Baştan beri gelen, bizim vaktimizden değil de diğer programlardan da sarkan. Onun için soru almasak daha iyi olur dediler. Ben de uyum sağlıyorum.
Teşekkür ederiz.
Tüm panelistlerimize teşekkür ediyorum. Sağ olun.
Katılımlarından dolayı değerli misafirlerimize ve anlayışlarından dolayı elbette değerli misafirlerimize çok teşekkür ediyoruz.